April 1915. The Gallipoli Peninsula. Soldiers gather on the rocky shores. The sea crashes against cliffs. Every face shows tension, fear, and anticipation. No one yet knows the scale of the disaster awaiting them. By early 1915, the First World War had reached a stalemate in Europe. Trenches stretched across France and Belgium, and commanders on both sides searched for decisive moves. The Allies conceived a daring plan. They aimed to open a new front against the Ottoman Empire. Their goal was the Dardanelles Strait, a critical route to the Ottoman capital, Constantinople. The strategy seemed simple on paper. Capture the Gallipoli Peninsula. Secure the strait. Knock the Ottomans out of the war. Then, supply routes to Russia would reopen. Yet, the planners overlooked crucial realities. Intelligence about Ottoman defenses was scarce. Terrain knowledge was minimal. Commanders assumed their naval bombardments would clear the way for landings. They did not. The first troops arrived on the peninsula in April. They faced steep cliffs, narrow beaches, and hidden trenches. Machine guns and artillery were waiting. The Allied forces included British, Australian, New Zealand, and French units. Many soldiers were young, untested in battle. Their officers were confident, almost arrogantly so. They underestimated the enemy's resolve. Preparations were rushed. Supplies were limited. Reinforcements struggled to navigate the narrow landing points. Every miscalculation compounded. Morale was high at first, fueled by propaganda and patriotic zeal. But the environment offered no mercy. Heat, dust, and lack of clean water added invisible burdens. Soldiers were exhausted even before the first volleys of enemy fire struck. Every plan relied on coordination between naval and ground forces. But miscommunication was constant. Ships fired too early or too late. Troops arrived scattered along hostile shores. The Ottomans, commanded by capable generals like Mustafa Kemal, exploited every weakness. They positioned their forces in commanding heights. Every movement of the Allies was visible. Every advance slowed by fire from above. The campaign had begun. Yet, the gap between expectation and reality widened by the hour. What was meant to be a swift victory quickly became a grueling struggle for every yard of ground. The seeds of catastrophe were already planted. As the days passed, the situation worsened. Initial landings met fierce resistance. Soldiers fell in waves. Trenches were hastily dug, often under heavy fire. The landscape was unfamiliar. Rocks and gullies became death traps. Artillery shells rained down. Smoke and dust obscured movement. Commanders grew frantic. Orders were delayed or misinterpreted. Units lost cohesion. Key decisions compounded the failure. Reinforcements were sent piecemeal. Supplies ran low. Communication lines broke under constant bombardment. Some units were trapped, isolated on ridges with no way to retreat. The Allies could not control the beaches. They could not gain higher ground. Every attempt to advance was met with devastating counterattacks. The enemy exploited terrain and intelligence masterfully. Mustafa Kemal's units anticipated movements and struck with precision. Every misstep of the Allies became a costly lesson. Soldiers endured hunger, disease, and fear. Exhaustion led to mistakes. Officers witnessed men collapse from heat stroke, infection, and sheer fatigue. The scale of misjudgment became apparent. Despite repeated attempts, the campaign stalled. Success seemed within reach but remained elusive. The Allies continued to throw troops into deadly assaults. Gallipoli became a graveyard. Waves of soldiers were cut down before reaching cover. Positions were overrun and retaken repeatedly. Casualty lists grew. Ships evacuated the wounded. Hospitals overflowed. The human cost was staggering. By May, the operation had lost strategic momentum. The initial plan to knock the Ottomans out of the war had failed. High command realized their assumptions were flawed. Naval bombardment alone could not secure victory. Terrain and enemy preparation had been underestimated. Miscalculations at every level created a deadly chain reaction. The campaign revealed the fragility of overconfidence. It exposed the limits of coordination between multiple forces and hostile, unfamiliar terrain. Gallipoli's cliffs and valleys became symbols of stubborn resistance. Each decision amplified losses. The Allies faced the grim truth: they were fighting a battle they could not easily win. August 1915 marked the height of catastrophe. Offensive attempts peaked. Troops clashed with entrenched defenders. Artillery shells tore through sandbags and stone. Waves of soldiers advanced into crossfire. Officers shouted orders over screams and explosions. Chaos dominated every sector. The losses were unprecedented. Thousands fell in single engagements. Entire battalions disappeared under relentless fire. Beaches were littered with the dead. Trenches were clogged with bodies, mud, and debris. Communication broke down entirely in some sectors. Soldiers could not identify allies from enemies in the smoke. Medical teams were overwhelmed. Field hospitals were buried under wounded men. Evacuation became a nightmare. Soldiers suffered not only from bullets but from infection and dehydration. The human toll was immense. Commanders were forced to make impossible choices. Every decision meant lives lost. By the end of the summer, the operation had achieved almost nothing. The Ottomans held their ground. The Allies were exhausted and demoralized. Strategic objectives remained out of reach. What had begun as an ambitious plan ended as a catastrophe. Every misjudgment, every false assumption, every logistical error had compounded into the deadliest military miscalculation. The campaign would remain in military history as a cautionary tale. It exposed the limits of planning under uncertainty. It highlighted how arrogance and underestimation of the enemy could produce staggering loss. Thousands of lives were sacrificed for objectives that were never fully achieved. The beaches are empty now. No footsteps disturb the sand. The cliffs stand silent. The wind sweeps over rocks scarred by gunfire. The trenches are overgrown. Mud has dried. Wooden posts rot and lean. Helmets lie half buried in dust. Rust covers discarded rifles. Everything once alive with noise is still. No flags wave. No cannons fire. No shouts echo. The guns have fallen silent. The artillery no longer screams. The sounds of war have vanished. Only distant waves crash against the cliffs. The sea moves as it always has, unaware of the lives lost upon its shores. The soldiers are gone. Names carved in letters and journals fade. Their faces are remembered only in photographs. Some letters never reached home. Some bodies were never recovered. Families mourned in vain. Graves are marked, unmarked, or washed away by tides. Each wave carries a fragment of memory. Each gust of wind erases another. Commanders are gone too. Their plans, printed on maps, crumble in archives. Decisions made in haste, under fire, now unread and unreadable. Strategic charts lie forgotten in basements. Records gather dust. Papers fade into yellowed oblivion. Those who studied the campaign are long dead. New generations know little. Few recall the miscalculations. Few understand the cost. The landscape is different. Valleys once filled with smoke are empty. Hills scarred by shelling now bloom with wildflowers. Rocks and gullies remain, silent witnesses to what happened. Trees that survived war's fires grow slowly. Shadows of trenches linger like ghosts. The earth remembers longer than humans. Time moves on. Battles are taught in brief lessons. Textbooks reduce tragedy to lines on a page. Museums display artifacts. Helmets, rifles, and letters sit behind glass. Visitors look but cannot hear the screams. They cannot feel the fear. They do not see the heat of the sun on soldiers' backs. The smell of gunpowder and mud is gone. The desperation of dying men cannot be captured. Even memory of the living fades. Veterans pass away. Stories told to children are repeated fewer times. Words are forgotten. Memories blur. The dead outnumber those who remember them. History loses detail. Gallipoli becomes a name without faces. A chapter without voices. What was once chaos becomes silence. The sea and wind are patient. They erase footprints and scatter ashes. Stones crumble. Trenches collapse. Shell craters fill with water. The battlefield returns to nature. Quiet dominates. Birds nest in ruined parapets. Grass sways over broken rifle butts. A haunting stillness takes hold. No one calls the names of the fallen aloud. The cliffs do not answer. The waves do not remember. Only the land keeps score. Only the scars on rocks and earth recall the scale of human loss. It is a memory without witnesses. A catastrophe without voice. Forgotten in textbooks, maps, and the pages of history. Gallipoli sleeps in silence. The disaster is complete. Only wind and waves carry echoes of men who charged, fought, and died. Only stones whisper fragments of the past. Only the cliffs watch over the empty beaches. The dead are gone. The living have moved on. And the history that should scream remains quiet. Forgotten. Buried under time. Silent. Thank you for watching. New historical stories are published regularly.